Kevin Nicholson is a U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran as well as president and CEO of No Better Friend Corps. Kevin, good of you to join us, sir. You know, every time I go on these natural disasters, we cover these things around the world. And who's right behind us? The U.S. military. So why not here at home, right? It makes sense.
It does. Good morning, Trace. And, you know, if you look at the most likely bad scenario in this entire COVID issue, it's seeing our health system, our healthcare system locked up like what you see currently in Italy. And really what you want to get to is the ability to add capacity. And I think that's what both the Mercy and the Comfort can ultimately do. They can add capacity. And if it gets to that point, National Guard units and the Department of Defense have the ability to build field hospitals, which also can add capacity. So although we know that many people that will contract COVID will show at best mild symptoms, the reality is you're worried about people gumming up the healthcare system, and this is a way to address that.
Yeah, and from your op-ed that you wrote, Kevin, I want to put this on the screen and read it to you and then kind of get you to follow up on it, if you will. It is appropriate to be concerned for the plight of businesses and employees affected by the closures. But as individuals, we can help the return to business as usual by slowing the rate of the virus's transmission. Hunkering down may help to keep medical facilities from being overwhelmed with patients. So you're saying, look, we may not even need the Mercy and Comfort if we can just do what they're telling us to do now and to stay inside.
Well, from President Trump to the CDC to Dr. Anthony Fauci, everyone's been pretty clear that we can, quote unquote, flatten the curve, which just basically means slow the rate of actual transmission of the disease for the virus from person to person by hunkering down. And so at the end of the day, when you get in these tough situations, whether it's in business or the military, whatever the case is, the idea is get through the pain point as quickly as you can, which means move to a solution, even if that solution is imperfect. And there is no doubt that hunkering down is an imperfect solution for many people. But the sooner we do this, the sooner we get through it, the less likely that we are going to need extra resources and extra capacity for our healthcare system. And the sooner we get foot traffic back into regular life and into businesses that are being affected right now.
Yeah, you know, I'm sorry. I apologize, Kevin. You know, we're on the Skype thing. It's all great. It's all brand new. It's, you know, the whole idea of this is, you know, some of the critics saying this hunkering down thing is all good in theory, but sometimes when you talk about New York, which they've backed off on now, sheltering in place, San Francisco and the Bay Area is doing it now. But if New Jersey's not on board and if Connecticut's not on board, then you have New York doing it, and then you have people crossing from Connecticut and New Jersey, and it just upsets the apple cart. Do you buy into that?
Well, I think, look, the American people are the most generous people on earth. They do so much for each other and for people all across the planet. The reality is here's a moment where we can do something pretty sensible. And the thing that's within our control is to not unnecessarily go out and socially interact with people at this moment. And by doing these little things, they add up to big things. And yes, the government can encourage us to do this. We don't need the government to do it. And I'm not even getting into any kind of financial spending packages or anything like that. But individual sensible actions taken in mass, all 350 million of us getting together and doing the right thing at this point can help, again, slow the transmission and get through this thing faster. And that's what's really going to reduce costs. And I'm talking about the cost of lost economic growth, the cost of expenditures from the government, whatever the case is. The reality is that the less we do to transmit the virus, each of us individually, the quicker we're through this and the quicker we're on to the next thing.
You know, we hear so much now, Kevin, about flattening the curve, and the CDC and NIH, all they talk about is flattening the curve, flattening the curve. And they came up a couple of days ago and they said, listen, we could do this. We could potentially see huge increase or flattening of the curve in as little as 15 days. It sounds extraordinary to a lot of people. What do you think about that?
It's a math problem, really, right? And I think this is one thing that I would urge all government experts to actually be more clear in, that the reality is that when you're dealing with millions of people, tens of millions of people, you're talking about hundreds of millions of individual personal interactions. Those add up extremely fast. And that's how you see transmissions occur, like what occurred in Italy, where people were not as careful about how they were interacting with each other. We have a chance here to take stock. And the Italian people have been pretty clear in sharing with the rest of the world, don't repeat our mistakes. Look at what we've seen and look at our healthcare system has been overrun. Try to avoid that. And I think we as the American people can look at that and say this is very clearly a math issue. The less we interact with each other unnecessarily at this point, the less we're going to do to transmit it, the less we're going to see the effects of it, both physical on our health, but also on our economy too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Italy and you look at South Korea, and there is a huge difference of the way these things were handled. And I'm not sure that the U.S. population would allow some of the measures they used in South Korea. I mean, South Korea, they were tracking credit cards. They were doing pretty invasive techniques, and stuff like that's just not allowed in democracies. So you come into the question there, Kevin, about, hey, how do we approach these things without violating civil rights?
Well, and that's why I wrote that article in The Hill today. It's really about, again, the 80-20 solution. In the military, we might say the 60-40 solution, and maybe get down to the 50-50 solution. But it's the best one that you can put forward today. And I think that, yes, there's many considerations for our civil rights right now. And this is why I would urge everybody in our country to think about what they themselves can do without the government even getting involved in this. And whatever government programs might be put forward in the future, I can't predict that. Trace, you can't predict that either. But we can say that we can control our own individual actions. And even if it's an imperfect solution, and it in some different ways is going to inconvenience each of us, these actions will add up. And you mentioned that there's indications that if we collectively make the right decisions, we could flatten the curve within a matter of weeks. And I think that that likely is true if you think about the math of it. We just each need to take control of our own destiny and do the right thing.
Kevin, I read the op-ed. It was well thought out, which is why we had you on. Good of you to join us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Trace. Be well and stay healthy.
You as well, my friend.